Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We are here each week to help you lead more confidently and make a bigger difference, both professionally and personally. This episode is sponsored by Kevin's free weekly e-newsletter, Unleashing Your Remarkable Potential, which is full of articles and resources to help you become a more confident and successful leader. Sign up by going to remarkablepodcast.com/newsletter. And now, here's your host, Kevin.
Good morning, everyone. Good day, everyone. Question, does happiness matter to you? You probably have an opinion on that, I'm sure. Does it matter to you at work? Let me ask you another question. Would you like greater engagement? I think I know the answer to that one. Today, we're going to talk about how these two ideas are connected and how to create more of each at work every day. Welcome to another live episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. You can get all future live episodes and therefore interact with us and see them sooner, because this episode's not going to be, we're having this conversation on the 24th of May. This isn't going to go live until August. So if you're hearing this in August, man, you should join us sooner. You can do that by going to our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to learn more and get connected there. And while you're here, if you're here with us live, especially, I want you to imagine that you're just joining us for a cup of coffee. If you have questions or comments or ideas, please put them in the comments. We'd love to see them. We can see them live. They will make for a better conversation between my guest and I, and eventually a better podcast for anyone who is watching it later. And today's episode is brought to you by Remarkable Masterclasses. Each month, we release a new skill in an advanced form of a masterclass designed to help you become the remarkable leader and human you were born to be. Details on how to get on board for a specific skill or to get discounts each month can be found at remarkablemasterclass.com. And without any further ado, I will introduce you to our guest today, Mr. Happiness. That's what I'm going to call him. His name is Eric Karpinski. He has been on the cutting edge of bringing positive psychology tools to workplaces for over 10 years with clients that include Intel, Facebook, speaking of Facebook, IBM, T-Mobile, Genentech, and many others. He's a key member of Sean Acor's Good Think team, trained as a scientist at Brown, and has an MBA from the Wharton School. He has a brand new book out. Well, it's not maybe brand new, depending on when you're watching, but here it is. Put Happiness to Work. 7 strategies to elevate engagement for optimal performance. It's been endorsed by Adam Grant, Sean Acor, and Daniel Pink. And today, he's our guest. Eric, welcome, sir. Glad to have you.
Excited to be here. Love your interview style and your energy. Looking forward to having a great conversation.
And so far, I'll just show you. We've got people from Mali and people from Iran. And I know that that's not all. That's just the people that have told us. So if you're here live, tell us. Tell us where you're from. Tell us what you're up to. Tell us why you're here. And while I start to talk to our guest, Eric, I am really glad that you're here. And so I want to start, and you know this because you've shared with me that you've watched and or listened to a number of episodes. I'm going to start with where I always start, which is tell us about your journey. You didn't probably wake up when you were 8 and think, I'm going to be an expert on positive psychology. So just a quick version of sort of how you end up here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I didn't wake up at 8, but I did wake up in high school and I said, I like being happy and I want to be happy. How do I do it?
What a novel idea. I think everybody wants that, but no one probably asked the second part of the question, right?
Right. Which is how? And society laid out a very clear path to me. They said, look, Eric, if you work hard, you'll become successful. Once you're successful, you'll have the money and the freedom to do what you want, and then you'll be happy. All right. Well, I took that to heart. I said, okay, what's hard work mean? It means getting into a great college. It means working hard in high school. It means doing all the things I need to do for that success. And fast forward 20 years, I sort of popped up my head off the sort of treadmill in 2008. And I said, I worked really hard and I got really lucky. And I look back at my career so far, got a biochemistry degree from Brown. I had the MBA from Wharton, like you mentioned. I had a resume full of those sought after jobs that paid well and like got interesting, cool experience. I was making lots of money. I was married to my college sweetheart. I had 2 great kids. I live in San Diego. beautiful weather all the time. I was more successful than I ever expected to be as that little high school kid. And I was absolutely miserable. That constant drive of more success, the next promotion, the next raise, the next big deal, the next thing, that drove stress, that drove anxiety. That anxiety drove me into insomnia. I just wasn't sleeping well because I was stressed all the time. And that insomnia really led to depression. And so while I was on this path to become happy, it led me completely the opposite way. It led me to the therapist chair. It led me to the antidepressant drugs. I realized I couldn't succeed my way to happiness. And this is in 2008. The positive psychology research movement was just it was just started. It was 8-9 years old. And I found this amazing research, this treasure trove of research talking about how we can be happier, how we can find more meaning in our lives, how we can be more engaged in what we're doing. And so I read it and I was like, this is such great stuff. I want to apply it in my life. So I spent a lot of time with my strengths, my energizing strengths and my personal values and figuring out how do I get better connected with people around me and how do I appreciate and feel valued. And then after 2 years of sort of doing that in my own career, I said, this is such cool stuff. No one's talking about it. No one's talking about this amazing research. I need to get out there and actually share this information. And so I spent the last 10 years working in organizations, helping them figure out, you see the research and you read it, but it's not something you can just take and say, oh, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. We're all different. We're all different people. So it's been fun to really work with teams and work with leaders to find how do we really apply it for our own team? How do we customize it for the people that we work with? And that's really, after 10 years, I was like, there's so much cool stuff. We can really make it practical. So I wrote this book to really say, here's the science behind it, yes, but the majority of it is how do we as individuals bring more happiness to our work? And then how do we as leaders? So 80% of it is sort of for any individual that wants to be happier at work and to help their colleagues be happier. And then about 20% of the book is really focused on leaders and specifically what leaders can do beyond their own happiness, beyond sharing it,
right?
But actually as leaders, how to make it happier. And as you said, they've gotten a great reception, great endorsements from Dan Pink and Adam Grant and Sean Aker. And so it's been great to actually see it in people's hands and hear the stories of people using these things in the real world, in the real offices.
All right. So you've got this book and the biggest word on it is happiness. And so we can't go any further until you tell me. Okay. And you said, I'm in high school. I want to be happy. What's your definition?
Yeah, no, really important. Happiness, because so many people have different perceptions of happiness. When I talk about happiness, I really use the umbrella term of any positive emotion. So feeling joy, feeling love, feeling pride, feeling inspired, feeling satisfied, feeling content, all of those count as happiness. The way that I think about it, the way that sort of the research groups it together. So it's not, and it doesn't mean you have to be a high-fiving, extroverted, run down the hallway, kind of like super enthusiastic. Whatever way you like to feel positive emotions, that counts. That's what we're talking about. And it's important that whatever way you like to feel it, that you express it in some way so people can see that you're feeling good, because that's what makes it infectious. That's what helps it spread.
All right. So then the other word that I mentioned in the opening, and it's another one of the words in the title, and it is one of the most consultancy words in the English language, and that is engagement. So now you got to give us your definition of that, because most people may not be thinking about the happiness one at work. We're going to connect them together here in a minute, but you've given us that definition for you. Give us your definition of engagement.
Yeah. So engagement is really when teams are engaged. When we talk, so much of the consultants, as you say, the consultants speak, and a lot of the research talks about engagement as a way of feeling, a way of being that makes us dedicated and makes us motivated to make things better. We're engaged in our work, and when the research is pretty amazing that how well it is tied to productivity and profitability and customer service. All these things that organizations want from their people increase significantly when they're more engaged. And it really is, it's a motivation. It's a feeling like you belong and you're part of something, and that you're willing to put in the effort to make it more successful.
So, all right. let's hook those two things together. What's the connection between happiness and engagement?
So it's interesting. I mean, engagement's been a major focus. It's been great research on it for 20 years. The last 10 years, just about everybody has been talking about it and measuring it. 70%, Deloitte said 70% of organizations have actually measured and tried to increase the engagement of their teams. And like I said, it's for good reason, right? We see productivity, like the ties to productivity and profitability and customer service and teamwork are indisputable. Hundreds of thousands of teams that they've studied, at Gallup in particular. But even with billions of dollars of investment, we've seen very little change. If you look at the Gallup research over the last 20 years, it stayed within just a few points of 30% for 20 years.
Yeah, the needle's not moving much.
The needle's not moving. We're doing something. We're not doing it right. We're doing something wrong. And here's what we're doing wrong, is that leaders think and talk about engagement. When they do talk about it with their teams, they're only focused on the benefits to the organization, right? The profitability and the productivity we talked about. Or they're focused on, hey, I've heard about engaged teams. They're more committed. They're more loyal. They're more willing to put in discretionary effort. Well, when you hear that as one of someone's employee and they're like, you're telling me I'm not committed enough? You're telling me I'm not loyal and I'm not working hard enough? Is that what you're telling me? Well, I'm really motivated now, right? So you end up in this place where they're talking about it from a benefit of the organization and the benefit to them. They're not talking about the benefit to us. But here's the thing. Most people just don't care about their engagement, but they do care deeply about their happiness. And so what's really cool is when you look at people who are engaged, they're feeling lots of activated positive emotions. They're feeling inspired. They're feeling proud. They're feeling enthusiastic. They feel like they belong and they're part of a team. They feel like their work matters. So if we can focus as leaders, not on, hey, these are the outcomes we're going to get, and isn't that great, la-di-da, but instead, hey, we're going to be focusing on these 7 strategies that we know are going to increase our happiness, they're going to increase your happiness, and they're going to increase our engagement at the same time, right? Now we're in a place where people are going to be motivated and engaged and going to be engaged in engagement activities, right? They're going to be engaged in what we're talking about. So
because they immediately see benefit.
They see benefit
because they've got that teenager in their past, just like you were like, I want to be happy. So you've got 7 strategies. Yep. And the one I want to talk about first is the title. I mean, I love it, but the title of the chapter is counterintuitive to most people, right? Mm-hmm. And that is, I think it's the 3rd strategy. It doesn't really matter. Put stress to work.
Put stress.
Really? Like, aren't we happy? Isn't stress like the opposite of happiness? Like, what's the role of stress in all of this, sir?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And before I dive into the specifics, because I really important that we get to some of the practical tools. I like to think of this book and of this whole and of this interview as an action buffet, right? I'm going to give you a bunch of different tools. You do not have to do everything. In fact, I want you to just listen and see which tools sound interesting to you, which ones sound intriguing, because that's what I've got dozens of these tools in the book. And so then you experiment. Hey, this sounds cool. I think this will work with my team. Try it out. Try it out for a while. If it works, awesome. We'll figure out how to integrate it into your life. But if it doesn't work, if it feels awkward after trying it 4 or 5 times, well, then find something else. The research only tells us what works for the average, for the majority, but it doesn't mean it's going to work for you.
I think there's 2 really important things that you just said, Eric. And one is that there's a lot of tools here, right? You can't try to do them all. You're not going to do any of them. So that's a bad strategy. But the other thing that you're saying, and you say it in the book as well, that a lot of times authors don't say, and it doesn't necessarily mean they don't believe it, but they don't say it as clearly as you just did, which is, hey, find the ones that work best for you. Find the ones that are going to move the needle for you. Find the ones that feel most comfortable for you and your team. Not that comfort is the be all and end all, but I think that's why I think where you're taking us is so very, very practical. So take us into some of the stuff we can try or do. Well, first of all, why
stress, right?
Why stress? And then give us a couple of tools.
So stress obviously draws a lot from our happiness. And when we're really stressed, it can take away. But here's the thing about stress. You know, we hear about how it's killing our health. We hear how it's killing our productivity. Like anytime you read an article on stress, it's like, oh my God, all these terrible things are happening. Well, Kevin, when you hear that, and then you start to feel some stress, what does that do?
Well, it puts people under pressure, right?
And it makes them more stressed.
Yeah.
You're stressed about feeling stressed, and that just snowballs. It makes it even worse. Here's the thing: stress evolved to help us, right? When we're stressed, we tend to breathe a little faster. Our heart rate kicks up. The liver actually releases all this energy, this glucose and these fats into this blood system. It's all getting us ready to act, to move, to go forward. Well, that's good. Like, why are we so stressed about it? Well, there are there's two major categories of reactions, how we respond to stress. One is called the threat response. And this is when we really feel like overwhelmed. And we tend to, there's the weird things that happen in the body. It actually shunts some of the blood from the brain and the active parts of the brain towards the core. Same thing with your periphery, like the blood is drawn away from the legs and the arms and the periphery. And it causes this increase in blood pressure, right? As our heart rate's going up, but we're more constrained about where the blood goes. And that causes a lot of the health problems. And because there's not as much blood in the brain, we don't think clearly. We can't really make decisions. Well, there's another response that people don't talk about. And that's the challenge response. And the challenge response is amazing because it does something. It's when we feel like this is going to be hard, this is going to be big, right? We're feeling that stress just as strongly, but then we recognize that, hey, we actually have some things that we can do. I know what the next step's going to be. I know how to move forward against this. And what happens when we get that response, it actually reopens the arteries and the veins in the brain and in the periphery. So all of a sudden we don't have that strong resistance. The blood pressure is not as strong. Our heart's still beating fast, but the blood has somewhere to go. And importantly, it opens blood into the more evolved parts of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, where we can actually recognize that we're feeling stressed. Instead of being in a reactive mode, we can choose what we're going to do. And we have the logic and things that we can go forward with. There's a lot of research over the last 10 years that really talks about, that differentiates these two and says, here's how we get into a challenge response. And I can't get into all of them. I've got it's called the Aspire tool set, whole chapter about this. And there's a worksheet and everything that'll help you go steps. But one of the biggest ones is simply recognizing that stress can be helpful to us often makes it so. So just remind yourself the stuff that I started with a section with, which is, hey, my heart rate's going faster, I'm breathing fast. This is getting me ready to respond. If we actually, in fact, a study that said, if we just say, hey, this is my body getting excited, I'm excited, that will help us move into the challenge response and actually help us respond. Like such a study after study after study shows when we are in that challenge response, we test better on the GRE. We make better presentations. We actually are more productive in our work. We're more engaged. We're more connected with people. It's any way that you want to switch it. If we can find ways to switch. And one of the ways is simply, hey, this is helping us. This stress is helping us, giving us energy to move forward. Boom. That's step one. And there's a whole lot more in there, but I want to make sure we get some of the other strategies discussed about and, provide more on the action buffet.
Yeah. Well, but I think it's so important because so many people immediately label that as spaghetti-o. And that's really doesn't have to be that at all. It's like, there's a difference between responding and reacting. And if we stay in responding, we're in a lot better position. It's another way to talk about your challenge response versus
You're right.
Reaction, right?
Sure.
Right. And so, it's interesting. And I'm going to look at this real quick. If you're listening to this on the podcast later, last week I had Chester Elton on. We were talking about anxiety at work. Really important stuff. Wonderful new book. Unfortunately for all of you that are watching this live, or sometime between now and August, you're going to have to wait for that because we didn't do it live. You can't find it yet. But the connection between these two things are super important. So if any of you are listening to this or watching this later, you want to make sure you go back. If you didn't see the episode we just did with Chester, you're going to love the connection between these things. So, all right. So we've talked about one of the 7 strategies, which is how we can use our stress for good rather than ill. But another one of the strategies is around social connection. And, in the world in which we live today, we have become clearer than ever about the need for this. And there's an awful lot of discussion as we're doing this live at the end of May about, in fact, I just wrote about this on LinkedIn the other day that, man, this hybrid thing's not going to work because the social connection is all going to fall apart. So people are saying social connection is important, but it's, all of that is there. You're saying this is one of the 7 strategies we've got to focus on if we want to raise engagement and raise happiness. So let's talk about why that's all true. Give us some strategies. And then I want to make sure we talk about this as it relates to remote and hybrid as well.
Yeah, great. Because I think what's important is whether we're hybrid, whether we're fully remote, whether we're in person, there are tools we can do, and we need to be proactive about it. We need to be thoughtful about it. So being socially connected with others is a biological need. It is absolutely required. It's the most essential factor to our happiness. And it's a real big driver of our success and our engagement. We are wired for connection. And if we are lonely, and if we are not finding our ways to be connected, if we don't have people to rely on, or people who rely on us, then we're simply not going to optimize our well-being. And I'd say, with social distancing and with masking and everything, it's really, our social connection has really taken a hit over the last 14 months. And that means we need to be really proactive at re-engaging. I'm an extrovert. So funny now, as a lot of my
no one who's watching, by the way, would be surprised by that. Just saying.
Exactly.
Just saying. But now, since I interrupted you, I'm going to stay there for a second, because there are people, and you write about this in the book. There are people who say, well, wait a minute, that didn't matter to me. I'm an introvert.
Right.
To which you say,
absolutely false.
Right? Yeah. So go ahead. Say a little bit more about that.
But as an introvert and an extrovert, we're all human. We all need people. We don't need hundreds of people, right? We need 4 or 5 people that know us and that we know, that can rely on us and we can rely on, that we ask for help and we know that we'll help them when it happens. No matter whether you're introvert or extrovert, however you like to connect, just make sure you find ways to do that. And for introverts, make sure you recharge with the time alone and the time to think and to be by yourself. But we need to go out. We all absolutely need that. The data on health and social connection is, if you're lonely and isolated, it's the equivalent of smoking 5 packs of cigarettes a week in terms of the detriment to our health and our longevity. So that said, a lot of us are out of practice. Even us, those are extroverts, are out of practice. In fact, probably more so because we miss it so much. And the motivation to get out there, we need to find ways to reactivate our desire and our skills at social connection. And so 3 personal habits that I want to share. And by the way, the book is full of 3 categories: personal habits, things that we can just do ourselves; one-on-one habits, things we can do with other people one-on-one; and then team habits. And so I'll actually give you some examples of all 3 here in this, because I think it's so important that we talk about social connection. So 3 simple habits that we can take on ourselves to help increase our ability and our interest and our desire for social connection. One is gratitude for others. Just take a few minutes each morning, write down 3 people that you're grateful for and what specifically you're grateful for them for. What is it that's great about them? What do you appreciate? Amazing. It rewires your brain for the positive, helps you then find more positive things to appreciate, and it gives you lots of things that then you can go tell people, right? And the second one is something called the conscious acts of kindness, email or text. The thing is, simply find some time each day where you pick somebody in your social network and just send them a 2-line email, telling them why you appreciate them, sending them some encouragement, telling them why, sharing them some good news. Anything that's positive, and it's got to be short because it's so easy to just keep going. 1-2 lines, send it out and go.
The beautiful thing about being short, not only is Eric telling you all to make it short, but that should give you no excuse.
It takes
to not do it. You're not saying, well, what am I going to tell them? You're not writing a letter.
It doesn't have to be huge.
And it doesn't have to be a text. It can be an email. I love that. But it should be like a text. You all remember when texts couldn't be any longer than a tweet? That's where we're headed here, right? Go ahead, sir.
And so it's a great way to do it. Helps us. We feel good sending that love out. And of course, sometimes, a lot of the time, we're going to get messages back from people saying that was really awesome. Thank you for that. Or they might say when you first start, wait, are you drinking? Is something wrong? Because sometimes when you're changing the social script of messages you're sending, it takes people a little while to get used to it. But by the time you send the second one, they won't bat an eye. So that's the second one. Third one is something called a connection meditation. And this is an interesting way. It's going to sound kind of hippy dippy California to some of you, but it's backed by research from Stanford, from the University of North Carolina, from a bunch of other institutes. And it's also got 5,000 years of history. It co-evolved with mindfulness meditation. So it's also called loving kindness meditation. It's also called metta meditation, but I like to call it connection because it's you can use that in work, and no one's going to freak out that you're trying to bring love to work.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you just bring someone to mind that's real easy for you to love, right? And maybe it's a partner, maybe it's a niece or a nephew or a grandparent. Bring them to mind and just send them these nice wishes. May you be happy. May you be healthy, and you kind of open to the love you feel for them as you're sending them these good wishes. All right. And then you change to someone else, and you bring someone else that maybe you're someone you know well, but maybe you're having a little bit of conflict, or you just want to feel it stronger. And you send them the same wishes. You kind of open to the love and connection you feel for them. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And then you go to a third group or another third person, or maybe you can do a whole team, or you can do anyone you want. But then you bring someone that you don't know that well that you want to get to know. And you send them the same wishes. Boom. May you be happy and may you be healthy, visioning them. And the simple idea here is we're just taking the love we feel for some people and kind of sharing the wealth, spreading it out a little bit further. And we see that the research says we feel more empathy when we do this. We get better at connection when we finally do it. We actually we have more desire to connect. So great ways to sort of reactivate. And for any of these like personal habits, take 3 weeks and just really try it out, and then find some way to integrate it into your life going forward. Great way to do that.
We got a question that came in. It's kind of an overarching question. Nasir asks this, and I'll put it up on the screen. What is the starting point for leaders to do something serious about putting happiness in the workplace? I mean, some of the things you're talking about certainly do that, but put that leader hat on and give us a specific idea or two where people could start.
What I love to do is suggest that people get the book, read through it, find some ideas, give the book to a few other people on your team, and ask them what they feel. Well, you're gonna know some of the people on your team are gonna get more excited about this than others, about changing and bringing more happiness. I like to call these your co-conspirators, right? Get a small team of people that you know is excited about this. Talk about the book, talk about some of the things you want to try, see what they want to try, what they think will fit the team. And then just start it. But it's nice to have, when you announce it in a meeting, if no one's ever heard of this, it can be really awkward. But if two people are like, oh yeah, I think that's a great idea, Eric, here, I'll help you with this team. Well, I'll help you with this. You get a couple of people raising their hands, and suddenly it's the way you're doing it. And everyone else is going to, there might be some people like to think of themselves as curmudgeonly and like happiness doesn't belong in the workplace. That's okay. You don't need to bring them on board right away. Bring a couple people, start doing some of these activities. Don't force anybody to do any of this. And then people will see it. They're going to see that it's fun. They're going to see that it's helping productivity too. And they're going to engage in it. So it's a really good question. How do you get this started? Don't try to just do it all alone. Find a couple people on your team that will be excited. Work together and plan this out.
So I'm gonna take us in a slightly different direction before we move into the close of our time.
Yep.
There's something that you talk about in the book that I think is important in the chapter around, so we've been talking about happiness and we've been talking all sort of positive here,
yep.
But we all have, as human beings, a negativity bias. And you talk about something else that I think is useful for people to understand and see in themselves. And it's what is called gratuitous negative emotions. Can you just touch on that? Because I think it's an important concept that a lot of people haven't heard of and will be of great value to them. So, because most people do it. Yeah. So talk about that just for a second.
Sure. So negative emotions are hugely important, and they're hugely important for our happiness, right? Obviously they can take away from happiness, but there are certain types of negative emotions that we actually have to open to. When we're really disappointed that something bad happens, when we're losing someone that's close to us, those are what I call necessary negative emotions. We have to let them in. We have to feel them. We have to experience them. Otherwise, if we're just pushing them away, then they're going to pop up somewhere else and it's going to mess up our life. So then we need to figure out which one are the necessary negative emotions and which are gratuitous negative emotions. Because it's easy to take, hey, I didn't get that promotion or I didn't get picked for that team, and make it into this huge deal. Oh, this means they don't appreciate me. I don't have the skills, or I'm just not good enough. And then, maybe they're going to fire me. And it starts this whole set of stupid negative thoughts These are gratuitous negative emotions. These are the ones we can safely reduce and almost try to eliminate. We need to recognize when we're feeling them. We need to call it out. I'm kind of unfair to myself. Like, is that truly the fact? So they picked Sarah instead of me. That doesn't mean that I'm never going to get picked for something. It doesn't mean that I'm a terrible person, right? You need to start recognizing what you're speaking to yourself in your head and start countering it, bringing facts to it. And sometimes we just need to distract ourselves out of those gratuitous negative cycles. Like, get something that you really enjoy doing, and maybe it's a puzzle on your game. Maybe it's go for a walk. Just take a break from things when you're really in that gratuitous cycle and step out of it.
Maybe it's some connection meditation. So I've got one more. Well, let me just ask this: we certainly didn't talk about everything in the book. We're talking with Eric Karpinski, the author of Put Happiness to Work: 7 Strategies to Elevate Engagement for Optimal Performance. But is there any one specific thing that we didn't talk about that you really wished we would have? Any specific, item, tidbit?
I think I want to circle back to the social connection, because we talked about things we can personally do. I want to talk about 2 things that are really helpful to use to create that with our teams. One is in your one-on-one meetings with your people, especially if you have regular one-on-ones with different people, just start asking a simple question of, what's one good thing you've seen someone do on the team this week? What's one good thing? You can't, obviously as a leader, you can't see everything that's happening. So use your people to find out what other good things are happening. And by doing this simple thing, asking them, and then asking them consistently, and be like, I'm going to ask you this question each of our next 6 meetings at the beginning, right? And then they'll start to give you a list, and all of a sudden you'll have all these things that you can actually appreciate your people for, real things that someone else has appreciated them for. Awesome. It trains that person, just like the gratitude practice does. It trains them to start noticing the good things along the way. And hopefully they'll start noticing them more often. Hopefully they'll say, hey, that was really awesome. I really appreciate that you put so much detail on this response, right? That's just going to grow the amount of appreciation, and appreciation is a key part of social connection. Another one that I love that you can do with your teams is ask everybody on your team to put together 10 pictures from their life outside of work. And then ask one person in a team meeting each week for however long you need to present. It's called a Pecha Kucha presentation. It's Scott Crabtree up in the Northwest introduced me to this idea. And here's the key. You only get 10 to 20 seconds per photo to describe it. So there's no long involved stories. It's like, hey, I was an Air Force kid growing up, so I lived in these 10 cities. This is me in my beekeeping suit, because I'm a beekeeper. I've got 2 hives going on. Hey, I was diagnosed with cancer last spring. I had a surgery in the fall, and I'm cancer-free now, right? That's all the kind of information you get. But what happens is everyone gets a feel for who the people are that they work with, what matters to them. And it plants all these seeds of amazing conversations that happen after the meeting, right? Hey, I didn't realize you were a beekeeper. Do you get stung all the time? Right? Like, how does that work? And like, I've got a friend who's going through breast cancer right now. What were some of the challenges you found? Whatever the issues are, you're going to create these conversations that happen offline that is really going to help bind your team together.
Yep. Michael says, applying challenge response to emotional situations is basically what you're suggesting. I like a lot, melt the snowball before it rolls down the hill. That's a good way to say it.
Nice.
I'm going to shift to one of my favorite questions I ask people here.
Okay.
What do you do for fun?
I am an extrovert, so I've got all of this energy and like social interactions, getting people together. I love to, go to get people in the park in the afternoon and go play bocce, but like all terrain bocce where you bounce the balls off things and you do all kinds of crazy stuff. Anything we can do with people really drives my happiness significantly. So that's a big part of how do I proactively do that, especially as we're coming out of this pandemic and have vaccinations and ways to do it. So that's my biggest driver of happiness.
And behind you, for those of you that aren't watching us, you can't see all the books behind him. So I know that he hasn't answered this question. What are you reading these days? Eric, what would you share with people that people might want to know a little bit more about or read themselves?
Adam Grant's new book, Think Again, is all about recognizing the patterns we get stuck in about belief and about trying to convince others. And it's a magical thing, both about recognizing that we get stuck in our patterns and that we need to really observe and honor that we really don't know as much as we think we do. And then he flips it. Then he's like, and here's some tools that we can use to help others recognize when they're not there. Not arguing them to death, trying to convince them, that doesn't work, but a lot of great tools for how do we engage with people that believe differently than we do, and how do we try to make some. So obviously hugely important at work, and hugely important with all the political discussions and all the distrust that's happened in the world. Like, how do we engage in ways that are actually honoring the human that's behind those thoughts and those beliefs?
So Eric, if people, and obviously they want to read Put Happiness to Work, 7 strategies to elevate engagement for optimal performance. Eric, where do you want to point people? Where can people learn more about what you're up to, what you're doing, how can they connect with you, etc.? I'll put the link to the book up here, puthappiness-to-work.com. But what else?
Yeah. So puthappiness-to-work.com, it's a great way to whichever way you like to buy it. If it's independent bookstores, if it's Amazon, if it's Barnes & Noble, you can do it there. I'm on LinkedIn, really active on LinkedIn. So you can certainly find me. Eric Karpinski is my LinkedIn handle. I'm building up my Twitter. It's not my most experienced thing, but that's something to do. And my wife and I write a column that just got picked up by Psychology Today, and it's called "Put Happiness to Work: Sticky Situations." So if they want to, we're going to be posting the first one. By the time the podcast releases in August, there'll be 15 of them up. But we're just going to be posting our first couple this week. So yeah, I think that's it. And then my main website is erickarpinski.com. Eric is with a C, Karpinski is with a K. And then if you sound it out, Google will find it for you.
It really will, actually. ERICKARPINSKI.com. Eric Karpinski, or puthappiness-to-work.com. And so before we go, everyone, I have a question now for all of you who are listening and watching, and that is, now what? What are you going to do with this? Well, certainly today, Eric has given you a number of very specific strategies that you could employ, whether it's around connection, meditation, whether it's around thinking of gratitude about others, or how you can be grateful for others, whether it's things for your team, whether it is being aware of your gratuitous negative emotions, whatever it might be. The challenge for you today is to take action on something that you got, because if you don't do that, this will have been a very little lasting value. So Eric, thanks so much for being here. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Kevin. That was a fun discussion. Glad we got to get through that. We got to really talk about things to do, and thank you for encouraging them to actually start something.
And, we hope that you'll come back with us, everyone, if you're watching or listening, you come back with us again next week, because we'll be here again with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.